Choosing Chaos, Solo Motherhood by Choice, the podcast for women who are done waiting for the one and ready to become the parent on their own damn terms. We're talking fertility, pregnancy, emotional chaos, and the village that it takes to raise a kid. Sometimes you're crying in the bathtub. Sometimes you're crying because your toddler bit you. And sometimes you cry because you chose all of this. Welcome to motherhood, solo style. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Choosing Chaos, Solo Motherhood by Choice. I am your host, Laura. This week, we are going to dive a little bit more into my story as a part 2 from earlier in this season. Getting through the very first trimester felt like survival mode for me. Around 9 weeks, I began throwing up on a consistent basis. And when I say consistently, I mean almost daily. That didn't just fade after the first trimester, though, like people say it will. It continued all the way into 29 weeks. I was part of the small percentage of women who get second trimester sickness. Yay me! On top of that, I was dealing with frequent migraines up to 3 to 4 times a week. And these weren't just my normal migraines that I've had since I was a little girl. They were the kind that completely took me out. There were constant cycles of nausea, exhaustion, severe pain, and it started to wear on me mentally just as much as physically. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking, something isn't feeling right. I was really concerned that I might be showing early signs of hypertension. But every time I brought it up to my physicians, I was told the same thing over and over again, that it typically doesn't start to show until around 20 weeks. So I try to trust that. But it didn't really settle my mind. By 14 weeks, things hit a breaking point for me. I was throwing up nonstop and had one of the worst migraines I'd ever experienced. It got so bad that I ended up driving myself to the ER while also throwing up into a bag on my lap. They ran a bunch of tests, but because I was pregnant, they couldn't give me the standard migraine cocktail that I have previously had during other ER trips. They did what they could, and the migraine subsided for just a little bit, but sadly it didn't fully go away, and eventually it came back. They checked my urine, no concerns with protein. My blood pressure was elevated, but the chicken or the egg, right? Which one came first? Did the migraine come first or did the blood pressure? They attributed the high blood pressure to the migraine that I was having because my body was in pain. One of the most important parts of this ER trip was that baby was doing great. There were no concerns with my son. So physically on paper, everything looked completely okay. Something you may have heard me say a few times throughout this season is that I didn't really tell many people that I was pregnant until later on in my pregnancy. And I want to explain why I chose not to say anything until later in my pregnancy, because I know that it surprises a lot of the listeners and even some of the guests that I've had on this show. A big part of why I didn't say anything was fear. Fear that something could go wrong. Fear of other people's opinions of me. And honestly, I just wanted to continue protecting my peace for as long as I could. Staying in my bubble, just my son and I. There were so many moments in my life where something really exciting was happening, whether it was dating somebody new, starting a new job, moving out of state. And it felt to me like the second I shared those exciting moments in my life, something shifted. Not every time, but enough times that it stuck with me. I think over time that created some mindset for me that if something good was to happen, I needed to keep it very close to my heart until I knew that it was rock solid. And because I was so sick throughout my pregnancy, it didn't exactly feel exciting to me at times. And there were days where I was thinking about announcing or sharing my joy, but I was just trying to get through the day. I was just trying to get through the workday. I was just trying to keep my sanity and keep my health at bay when I could. I worried a lot about my baby, of course, but also about my ability to keep going for however many months there were left and feeling the way that I was feeling. It wasn't that I didn't think I was capable of doing it. It was just physically exhausting to be that sick for that long. That worry brought me a lot of anxiety, especially around hitting milestones. Getting to 12 weeks felt huge. then 16 weeks, and then that anatomy scan. Each one felt like a checkpoint that I needed to reach just to feel a little bit more secure in my pregnancy. So in my mind, waiting until after the anatomy scan, it felt right to me. We'd been halfway through at that point, and it felt like a moment where I could finally exhale a little bit and start to share it more openly. I didn't start telling friends until around 17 weeks. For me, that felt like a safe point to begin sharing that news. But even then, I was really selective in who I shared this news with. The people closest to me, I made a point to tell them in person. I didn't want to just drop that kind of news over text or a phone call. It felt way too important to me and too personal for that kind of conversation. Of course, not everyone I'm close to lives nearby, so for a few of them, those conversations had to happen over the phone. And while it wasn't my first choice, it still felt really important for me to have those real intentional moments with these individuals in my life. And the responses, to be honest, they varied. Some people were really excited right away, asking questions, wanting to know everything, just genuinely happy. And those moments meant a lot to me. But others, you could tell that they didn't know how to react to the news. I can still picture the look on a few of their faces, the pause when they were trying to process, trying to figure out what to say, or even how to say it. One response that sticks out to me was, "You're joking, right?" And whether it was meant in a lighthearted way or not, it didn't land the right way for me. In that moment, it almost made me feel like my situation needed to be explained or justified, when in reality, it didn't. And on top of that, I was also navigating people's opinions about choosing to have a baby on my own. Most people were supportive, but there were definitely a few ignorant comments, whether it came from someone I saw regularly for self-care, a neighbor, or hearing things like, "Did you hear how Laura got pregnant?" There were also moments where people questioned my ability to do this on my own, or asked why I would choose to have a child without a father. And those comments, they stay with you, not because they define your experience, but because they remind you how quickly people can judge something that they do not fully understand. A lot of people also didn't realize how far along that I was because my bump was still so small. And I got really good at hiding it. So when I told them that I was already well into my second trimester, there was an added layer of surprise there. It almost felt like I was sharing two pieces of important news at one time. Then came my 20-week anatomy scan, which is supposed to be this exciting milestone, right? My mom came with me, and I'm so very grateful that she did because a part of that experience was really special. Getting to share that moment with her is something that I will always hold on to. But at the same time, that appointment turned into one of the scarier moments of my pregnancy. Baby boy was completely content, just lounging in there. And because of that, they had trouble getting all the measurements that they had needed. His spine and a few other areas weren't clearly visible, so I had to go back for a more in-depth scan at another facility. Within about a week, I went for a follow-up, and during that scan, they found white spots on my son's heart. And hearing that, your mind immediately goes to the worst case scenario. They told me that white spots can sometimes be markers for Down syndrome, and pretty quickly I was referred to maternal fetal medicine. Thankfully, I was able to get in fast, but the waiting period, even though it was short, feels incredibly long when your mind is racing. I went into that appointment already anxious, but I will say that the tech I had was incredibly comforting, and that made such a difference. She explained everything in a way that actually helped calm me down. She told me that white spots are more common than people realize. At one point, they were considered a stronger marker for Down syndrome, but now, if there are no other markers present, the level of concern is much lower. And in my case, baby boy wasn't showing any other signs. After that scan and conversation, maternal fetal medicine released me from their care. So in that moment, I felt a huge sigh of relief again. And I was finally able to exhale just a little bit more. But looking back with everything that unfolded later, my severe migraines, the hypertension, I do sometimes wonder if continuing care with maternal fetal medicine may have been beneficial. At the time, though, I trusted the information that I was given. And I just kept moving forward, doing the best I could with the information that I had in front of me. Throughout my pregnancy, I really learned what it meant to advocate for yourself. If something doesn't feel right, speak up. I tell you that time and time again, because nobody knows your body like you do. At 20 weeks, my blood work showed an elevated liver enzyme, which sent me straight to triage. I'm very grateful that I had a friend who could take me and stay with me until my family arrived, because that moment felt overwhelming. All the thoughts of potentially having to deliver a baby at 25 weeks was scary, because I didn't know what that meant for his life or his future. After a full round of testing, my levels ended up stabilizing and I was cleared to go home. Then, around 33 to 34 weeks, I found myself back in triage again, this time because of increased blood pressure. I was there for just under 4 hours. They told me that if my blood pressure did not come down during that time frame, I would be admitted and kept in the hospital until 37 weeks. I even asked if bed rest at home was an option, hoping to avoid staying in the hospital that long. But they were very clear that it was not an option and I would have to be admitted into the hospital for 2 weeks. They explained how quickly things can escalate from gestational hypertension to preeclampsia, and they did not want to take that risk on me. At 36 weeks, I had been officially diagnosed with gestational hypertension and told that I was going to be induced at 37 weeks. Thankfully, my company allowed me to start my leave a little early, so I began about a week before my induction date. From that point on, it was daily monitoring, NSTs, blood work, constant checks. There were a few times that they were concerned about the decrease in my son's movement, but after longer monitoring, I was able to go home. Another part of advocating for yourself is advocating with your care team. I was originally assigned to a doctor for my induction that I did not feel comfortable with based on past experience and feedback that I had heard. So I made the call to the hospital and asked that I be reassigned to another physician during my induction. That wasn't easy, but it mattered to me and it helped to calm my anxiety knowing that I was going into an induction. As you listen to the stories of women on this podcast, inductions are wild and you're basically on call. They give you a 24-hour window and you just wait. My induction date ended up being a busy holiday weekend and I got a call around 2 p.m. to be there within 2 hours. Ironically, the doctor that I had switched away from ended up being reassigned to me. Can imagine how I felt about that. But thankfully, he never came into my room. A resident handled my care and I was okay with that. I'll be honest, I did not love being induced. I started at a hard 0 and my body just was not ready, even though my blood pressure was. We tried misoprostol first after 2 rounds and very little progress. And some scary moments where baby was in distress, we stopped and switched to the Foley balloon. The first attempt to place the Foley balloon did not go well at all. But once an OB had stepped in, it was quick and honestly not that bad in my opinion. I know that the Foley balloon sounds scary and a lot of women have had different experiences, but for me, it was not that bad. Eventually, I was moved to labor and delivery and I started Pitocin. After a slight delay, because my last supper, so to speak, got lost and showed up cold. Not ideal, but we made it work. They always tell you to rest when you get the opportunity to during labor, but that felt impossible for me. My blood pressure kept spiking. Baby's heart was all over the place. IVs kept failing, causing swelling. I went through 4 different IV sites and even the monitors kept dying on us. After I hit about 5 centimeters, I asked them to break my water so that I could get an epidural and hopefully get some rest. A crazy story is during that check to break my water, the doctor paused and my heart dropped a little bit because the look on her face was kind of concerning in that moment. It turns out that my son had his hand up on the top of his head, and he grabbed a hold of her finger as she was doing my cervical check. A little comic relief in the middle of all the chaos for us. Around 8 centimeters, things shifted quickly. I started feeling real constant pressure and pain despite the epidural. I kept saying something didn't feel right, but initially my nurse brushed it off as just normal pressure of being in labor. It was not. The pain kept intensifying, and after almost 40 hours of labor, I was exhausted. I was emotional. At this point, I was scared. I started begging for a C-section, asking them to cut me open. I was in so much pain. At the same time, I overheard the doctor that I likely wouldn't be able to sit through a spinal tap because of how much pain I was in. And that meant that I needed to have another epidural. That felt impossible in that moment. I did not know how I was going to do that. But somehow, with my sister holding one hand and a nurse holding another in front of me, I got through it. I don't even know how I stayed still, but I did. And looking back, my strength amazes me. Not long after, I felt the pressure everyone talks about, and I knew it was time. And while it was go time, it surprised me that it was just a nurse and a doctor in the room. You see on TV or TikTok posts that there's all these people in the room during your delivery. And I politely had asked my physician as this was all getting started, is anybody else coming? And it was almost comedic because I really didn't expect it to be just those few people in the room during my delivery. Throughout the 2.5 hours of pushing, the doctor stepped out for a while, and my nurse was my rock the entire time. Not just during the time the doctor stepped out, but I will say from the moment that she had taken over her shift at 7 o'clock in the evening, she was my go-to. I think she was one of the best nurses I had throughout the 51 hours of labor. Nurses are everything, and we need to applaud them for all of their support throughout this process. And at 10:46 p.m., my sweet little baby boy was born. There's this moment right after delivery where everything just goes quiet. Your heart just completely stops as you wait to hear that first cry. And then you hear it, and you can finally breathe again. Over and over again, you have heard me say to be your strongest advocate. You know your body more than anybody else. I know we talked about that earlier in this episode, but I'm telling you again, looking back, even at 14 weeks pregnant, I felt like something wasn't right with my blood pressure. I brought it up. It was repeatedly brushed off. And as my pregnancy progressed, that concern only grew stronger, especially as I got closer to 37 weeks. What I did not expect was how quickly things would shift after I had my son. After being home just a few days, I developed this pounding headache that felt completely different than any migraine I have ever experienced. And mind you, I did say this earlier in the episode, I started having migraines around the age of 4. The pain of this migraine was unlike any other. And as someone who has dealt with migraines their entire life, that's really saying a lot. At first, I tried to rationalize it. I thought maybe it was my body just being exhausted from going through 51 hours of labor. Maybe I needed something to reset my body. So I went and saw my chiropractor, hoping it would ease the symptoms, and it didn't. The next morning, I woke up and the pain was even worse. When they say that you can feel your heart beating in your head, they are not exaggerating. It was intense, it was constant, and impossible to ignore. That's when I knew something was really wrong. I called the nurse's line at the hospital, started checking my blood pressure, and after a few readings, I was diagnosed with postpartum preeclampsia. It ended up being managed with medication over the course of about 12 weeks, but it was a stark reminder of just how quickly things can change and why advocating for yourself is not an option. It is necessary. Managing my blood pressure became an added layer of stress in those early postpartum mornings. We always hear about the evening scaries, but for me, the morning scaries were just as real. I would wake up and be immediately in motion. Nurse my son, bottle feed, pump, take the dog for a walk, try to squeeze in a breakfast somewhere. And in all of that, I had to take my blood pressure, but not within 30 minutes of walking the dog, pumping, or having coffee. I had to remember to sit for an extended period of time beforehand. I also had to remember to not speak during the time that I was doing it. It all sounds simple, but when your mornings already feel like a race against the clock, it becomes a lot more overwhelming, especially when the clock is literally working against you. Because for me, 9 o'clock a.m. wasn't just another time. It was a deadline. That's when the nurse expected my blood pressure readings to be submitted. And if I didn't submit them by then, they would be calling. So everything in my morning felt timed, rushed, pressured. All of those little requirements on top of everything else created a constant underlying anxiety. It felt like I was always trying to stay one step ahead of something else. I even had someone in my life that would text me every morning like clockwork asking, "How are you and baby Weston doing?" And at one point, I just stopped responding. Not out of anything personal against this individual, but because it felt like one more thing on a never-ending list that I needed to keep up with. And also, by the way, I don't know, I was anxious. I was overwhelmed. But I felt like I couldn't be transparent and say that because this particular individual always compared. And one thing that I will say to the listeners out there is, instead of comparing in those moments where somebody might be in need, listen with empathy and just say, "I hear you. I'm here for you. We don't want to hear a story about X, Y, and Z that you had gone through. Just be there for them." That said, I wasn't doing it completely on my own. I had an incredible support during that time. Amanda Doran from Moonlight Nurture helped guide me through my morning routines during those first 10 weeks. She was not here every day, but a few days a week, and I truly cannot put into words how much that meant to me. My mom was there, and at times my oldest sister too. And those moments of support made such a difference. When I look back on my pregnancy and postpartum experience, I'm honestly in awe of the woman that I am. Even with a small village, but not always having a constant village, I showed up for myself every single day. I figured it out. I kept going. Strength has always been a part of who I am, but I've realized something through all of this. Sometimes I don't want to be the strong one. Sometimes I want to let my guard down, to fall apart just a little bit, to not have to hold everything together. And if I'm being honest, that's something that is really hard for me to do, but it's something that I'm working on. I am forever grateful for my sweet, handsome baby boy who teaches me patience and love every single day. This journey hasn't been easy, and yes, being a single mom by choice comes with its own challenges. But the truth is, being a parent is hard, no matter what your situation looks like. I wouldn't trade this for anything, and I am so thankful that I chose to prioritize my desire to become a mom when I did. If there's anything that you take away from this episode, it's this. Give yourself permission to experience it all, not just the strength, but the softness as well. Before you go, thank you for being here and sharing this space with me. If choosing chaos has become even a small part of your journey, make sure that you are subscribed so that you do not miss more stories of courage, choice, connection, and beautiful, chaotic moments that are sometimes what we deal with through the realities of motherhood. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Patreon, and YouTube. Thank you for trusting us with your hopes and your hearts, and for embracing the beauty and the chaos alongside each and every one of us. Until next time, here on Choosing Chaos.